Ah, togetherness. Such a lovely thing. So I want to speak to you about togetherness and the pros and cons of it. When I read the Daily Word, it sparked some thinking. It sparked some thinking because I came out of a long-term relationship that was codependent, and I didn't even realize it. When I was in ministerial school, I had to do a particular paper on a topic of my choice. So I chose codependency. I researched it and I had examples. Never dawned on me that I was it. Everything is projected outward, right? It was a very difficult time in my life when I woke up to the fact that I was abandoning myself in favor of someone else's happiness, and that I needed to learn to love myself, to put myself first. I decided I would go to Italy, and I was going by myself. I had a 3-month sabbatical, and I spent 2 months of it in Italy by myself. I had no car. I was in a CC. I had a little apartment, and I would just rattle or wander around that little town, as we say in the South, like a BB in a wash tub, just kind of rolling around. At the time, I had been practicing with some Buddhist meditation, mindfulness. And so I would go out and explore my day by myself and come back to my little apartment, and on my computer I would write what I had observed. I had a TV, one of those old kind, with rabbit ears with the foil on it to get any kind of reception. And it was all the old shows that didn't make it in the U.S. And it was all in Italian. So that wasn't a comfort at all. So I turned to writing. I'm looking forward to going back in November with kind of a flip experience, because I'm going, obviously, with a group of people. And I hope to do some writings 19 years later. And my intention is to put this all in a book. The writings I did, part 1 and part 2. The advantages to being solo there was I met the most interesting people. If I had had a companion, that probably would not have happened. I met another woman from Pennsylvania, actually, and she overheard me speaking English to a waiter. And she came up to my table and she said, "Would you like to join me for dinner?" And I said, "Yes." And she told me the most heartbreaking story of her daughter. Her daughter was engaged to this man. They were in college. And one night, he was crossing the campus, and some thugs jumped on him and beat him to death. Her daughter was so sad and devastated by this that she took her own life. And here was her mother, who was an artist, whose art hung in a CC at the International Center for Peace. And every year she did a pilgrimage that took her through Switzerland, which is where the young man's parents lived. And the two parents would get together. They became friends. And it was a bittersweet thing. I never would have known that. I spent a couple of days in her company. A beautiful woman. We shared about our personal relationships. You'd think we'd have been best friends for life. I haven't talked to her since. That was 19 years ago. But I think about her often and send her vibes from my heart. You know, life can be tough, and we need each other. There's no doubt about that. However, when diversity comes, sometimes we just don't know how to handle it. What makes a community anyway? Well, let's go all the way back to the cavemen times, okay? People banded together for survival. You're a lone person out there, and here comes a lion, a tiger, and a bear, oh my. You know, people banded together out of necessity for survival. But that evolved into, I'll help you if you'll help me. I'll catch your baby when it comes out if you'll catch mine. And I read that this week. Also, sharing. You want your neighbor to be well fed. And if he didn't catch a rabbit that day, maybe you would share yours. Again, a matter of survival. And out of that grew values and ethics, what you do and what you don't do. But then you're wandering around out there with your tribe, and all of a sudden you see another tribe doesn't look like you. They haven't put life together the same way you have. What are you going to do? Survival says you're threatened. You know? Do unto others before they do unto you. Thinking starts. And so we create this polarization. And it's hard as human beings not to go into judgment and to isolate, to step back when we meet people who don't reflect how we are. Rather than assisting one another, we look to each other to validate each other. Am I doing this right? Am I holding my mouth right? You know, all the subtle little signals that we give one another about whether or not we are acceptable. Proverbs says, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Anytime we see the word Lord in Scripture, we know that's spiritual law. That's what this. So unless our consciousness is built on spiritual principles, everything in the outer has no meaning. As many of you know, back in the day, I was in my 20s, early 30s. Tore down a church, a little church in Georgia, hauled all that wood back to Tennessee, designed on graph paper a house, and built it. And believe me, it wasn't a simple box. Balcony, bedroom, slanting this, stained glass here and there, and you know, I was going for it, right? I'm proud to say that house is still standing. But I didn't do it by myself. Friends came. Friends came with their hammers and their saws. Back then I was a vegetarian. And we would sit around a campfire, and I had a big, heavy cast iron skillet, and I'd cut up vegetables and cook it over the open fire. And they had kind of a smoky taste, but that was okay. And then, because we had no electricity, we'd sit around, and my husband at the time was a musician, and he'd play his guitar, and they'd bring their instruments, and it was really a special time. I either bathed in the creek where the house was built, or I'd knock on a friend's door and say, "Can I have a hot shower, please?" And they would. Never be afraid to ask for help. Never be afraid to ask for help. Being by yourself can be beneficial if it's for the right reasons. I spent those 2 months in Italy processing this divorce I was going through. And it took a lot. But I was in no mood to be around a lot of people. And I needed to be in a place that was not familiar. And so that was my impetus. Other times, if I'm isolating, just because I don't want to do anything, then that's when I need to take the initiative. I have about 3 or 4 friends who live all over. I make a point to call them at least once every 2 or 3 months, just to keep in touch. Why? Because I love them, and I care about them, and I want to know what's going on in their life. Just because I've moved away doesn't mean they've moved out of my heart. And that's true for most people. So when do we come together? How do we come together? And what is the purpose for coming together? Do I need your shoulder to cry on? Do I need you to tell me I've done the right thing? Do I need you to tell me there's nothing wrong with me? Maybe I need you to tell me that my thinking is stinking and I need to change my attitude. That's what a good friend really does, you know. Will be there for you no matter what. In order to have good friends, you need to be a good friend. And we know that. There are many ways to communicate with people. And the number one thing I think is to own your own feelings and take responsibility for them. Nobody can make you feel a certain way. You might get triggered, but it's not their fault. I don't care if they're being a total patoot, you know? How you feel is your business. And it's monkey business or it's healing business. Being in relationship to one person, a family, a community, a country, a world starts here. It always starts here. So, our aging saging group that met this past week, we went around the circle. What do you hope to get from this meeting, this group? And almost every single person said, community. Community. Knowing that there are people who are experiencing what I'm experiencing, who need what I need. That communing, the root word of community, is all based in spirit when it's for the higher good. There can be communities that aren't for the highest good. Gangs, for instance. We are here to hold one another and to lift each other up, to encourage what is right and what is good and what furthers all people, not just ourselves. And the only way we can do that, truly, is to go apart for a while, as did Jesus. He went apart, not only to just meditate and pray, but to just be still. Just to be still. He reminded himself of the truth. It's a gift to have good friends and to have this community in particular. And I'm grateful for each one of you because you give me permission to be myself. And I give it right back to you. That's it for the moment.